Tell them this is. Tell them this is. Tell them this is our time.
Good afternoon and welcome to In Our Time. Happy Easter to you and your family. And I think personally I want to say thank God for Jesus, for the work that He came to do on earth. In Him I live and move and have my own being. And we wish you and your family a very good Easter and safe kite flying. We have a very interesting program this afternoon. We have some very interesting people in our studios, and we're going to be talking about youth and all things youth. We're going to talk about education and culture and sports and music and books and writing and all things youth. We have with us a very prolific writer, a young man of no mean order, and Ruel Johnson. This is a guy who is not only very versed in poetry and prose, but I think he probably sells a lot of newspapers to Starboard News and Kite Show and all of the other entities. So we have in our studios with us this afternoon Entertainer Marlon, we have Quasi Ace, and also we have Calvin Burnett. So we're looking forward to a very interesting program. And again, once Ruel Johnson is here with us, we're going to be talking about few things. This is a man who knows a little bit about everything, so really looking forward to it. Ruel, welcome. And we have also, well, you guys know Essie by now, and James. James looking more handsome than usual. We're showing off our new studios, I guess. Ruel, welcome. How are you doing? And what are you up to these days?
I'm doing well, and in addition to being involved as I can be in the political process, in terms of commentary, etc., trying to write.
And trying to pick up another Guyana Prize, no doubt, this year.
As much as I'd like to, I don't have the time. But
okay, awesome. We're talking about youth, and how do we engage our young people, not only in our electoral process, but how do we engage our young people in governing and decision making past May 11th?
First of all, I think you need a definite policy guidelines in place. It's one of the tragedies that we have is that we don't have an overarching policy for youth inclusion within not just the electoral process, but the democratic process overall, and governance in general. And governance in the widest sense that young people should feel that if it is that they have an opinion or they have something worthy to contribute, that there are no restrictions, particularly because of their age, to that decision, to the general decision-making process. That's not currently the situation that we have in the country. There are too many barriers for inclusiveness.
And we were talking just before the show started about where we are currently and the fact that youth seem to be more tokenism than real mainstream part of policy making.
Now, first of all, I guess I can congratulate you here on having this program, because this, in a very real way, is the young people getting a medium for expression on I take it serious issues, and usually you find the other way around. You find some older producer inviting young people to give their. I see you've had people like Moses Nagmutu and Joey Jagan here.
Yes.
And see we've essentially done we flipped the process. You actually you creating the space and inviting them on. So
We had Norval Hines. We had Norval a few weeks
Oh yeah, no, I'm saying I know you had young people on, but I'm saying you've also had is that you've created a space on your own initiative and invited older people on to give them an audience, and that is the sort of thing that needs to be replicated throughout. But I can say this: we can complain as much as we want about a lack of of avenues for youth inclusion, but youth themselves have to be able to take the initiative. I keep making the point that in the pre-independence era, in the era leading up to independence, every single person involved that we see in these older pictures with the gray hair, etc., level of maturity when they will turn president or opposition leader or PM or whatever position. People like UC Koyana, LFS Burnham, Chedi Jago, Ashton Chase, each one of them started that process in their 20s, in the mid-20s. When Jagan and Burnham became premier and president, etc., it was in the 30s or early 40s maximum. So young people have to start taking initiative and crafting their own avenues for expression. And as much as the wider society and the current leadership needs to cooperate with them in creating those avenues.
Awesome. Where are we? I know you've written a lot about this and discussed it in the public forum. Where are we on a national youth policy? Because what we were talking about earlier on is the fact that a national youth policy connects a lot of different areas for the ultimate development of our young people. I know the idea of a national youth policy has been floated for a very long time. Where are we currently on that, and where do you think that we should be going?
Well, it's the focus on youth from an overarching international standpoint started probably in the early 90s, etc. So we tried to tie it to the 1997. It's sort of escalated in the past 10 years internationally. However, we've sort of deliberately, I think, failed to catch up with the trend. We've had about 4 different processes of youth consultation towards establishing a national youth policy.
A lot of money spent on them too.
Tons of money. It's both state resources as well as donor funding. I mean, millions and tens of millions of dollars on 4 different field processes. But most importantly, when you have the Minister of Culture, Youth and Sport, bringing together young people for hours and hours, overall it's probably days. It's probably weeks in total. It's for the accumulated time of young people dedicating the time only to in these consultations, and more often than that is completely voluntary time, and nothing comes out of it. What you've done is not only you've squandered national resources, you've squandered donor resources, but you've also squandered time that people have contributed, and we still don't have a national youth policy.
I really, if I may jump in a bit, I'm glad you brought up this squandering, because I wanted to zoom in not on 2 aspects of the squandermania as I would have seen it.
Yeah.
The first thing is in terms of culture, and I must say that I myself as a poet owe a lot to you. You would have, as Guyana probably does not know, Ruel would have mentored me and worked with me very closely on my 2 books when I went for the Guyana Prize. I think
That's a lot of work.
that's a lot of work. Yes, a lot of work.
Let's work in the claims, but yeah.
In culture, the minister boasted not only of the widespread consultations, as he says, he also boasts, Minister Frank Anthony, he also boasted of investment in arts, boasted of investment in the press, he boasted of investment with the Guyana series and other books.
Yeah.
There were a lot of boasting on his part.
Yeah.
Millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars were claimed to have been spent on these programs culturally.
Yeah.
Where are the fruits?
A couple of things. First of all, there's money being spent, and the money is being wasted, and then the money is not being spent where it should have. I'll give you a good example. The Umaniana, which is part of our national heritage, I mean, it's burned down, that, if there were an overarching cultural policy, should have been ensured. So you don't have to be putting to tender money to rebuild it back, or having parliamentary approval of that. That should have been almost automatic. There are a couple of other instances where we have a lot of money, as approved by Parliament, invested in supposedly in culture, but which wasted. I did a story online on the museum, for example, which is a good example. There's a new display, digital display in the museum. I looked into it. In summary, it was an $8 million project. When I calculated and I contacted experts, etc., to verify my calculations, it was about $4 million that was actually spent on the museum. But somebody who's connected to somebody in the museum got that contract. So, and of course, it happens in every other aspect of governance, is this money being siphoned off. But you ask, where's the money in culture that has been invested? It's been put into thing. You have the Caribbean Press books, for example. That is probably, I think it's about 40 million or more, $8 million that I've calculated so far, purported to have been spent on the Caribbean Press books. We don't see where the books are. We don't even know if the books, as claimed to have been put into the local system, are there.
Well, I could say, for example, there was the anthology in which they featured certain poets.
Yeah, you were featuring.
I was featured in one of the books. But besides being featured, you see, what I'm trying to get young people to understand is that we write. Anyone can pick up a pen and write a poem. But the quality, I know you have been an advocate under the Janus program for not only mentoring and tutoring, but a great investment in terms of seminars and training sessions to mold poets. And I see that they've never heeded that advice. We've never seen any investment going to the perfecting of the skill of poetry. Because poetry is not just a talent.
Yeah,
it's a skill that could be perfected.
And even with that, I think part of it we got to discuss is the sustainability of programs, because we're good at building stuff, we're good at starting stuff, but then ultimately, they kind of taper off and eventually fail. You had a good place like Upscale that nurtured a lot of poets, but we don't have any funding for a national place like that where young people can go and really sit down and enjoy poetry and be molded and in a sustainable way. Even in a workshop setting, there is nothing being done at the government level, at the ministry
That's
level.
what Royal is advocating for.
And so
That's what he's
there,
advocating for.
there's a dire need for areas like that, and not only in poetry and
Drama and other arts.
drama and music and theater.
It's very simple. All you need is essentially one creative space. And when I say one creative space, I'm talking in terms of community. I was in Amsterdam last year, etc. And what, for example, the city council, the city government does, as well as the national government, is they put funds directly into spaces that are currently doing stuff. So if you start up something, you can apply for matching funds from government. So government itself doesn't necessarily have to get directly into the money that has been squandered in almost every aspect of culture could have been directed towards what are essentially public-private partnerships and artistic development. That's not been done. But one of the ideas that I'm going to recommend as part of this project I'm working on now is that you can have a cultural policy in which you inject support, both technical as well as financial support, into, for example, municipal cultural spaces. So you might have an upscale, and if that doesn't work out, it's a private sector thing that was pushed by a good friend of mine in South George, but I invested a lot of time and effort into it, even when it wasn't feasible. But if that fails, or whether or not it fails, you have a parallel space wherein you can have a building dedicated specific, a municipal art center. You can have one in Georgetown, you can have one in London, New Amsterdam, wherever my name is. But you can also make a deal with NDCs that have spaces, that have these big buildings that people, you have several offices, they have a lot of space that is not utilized. You could actually have municipal arts, local government art centers within those spaces as well. We spoke earlier about an integration, and schools are good art spaces. We spoke earlier on the need for, so you might have one policy area, but you can integrate it into other existing policies. So youth and culture are intertwined. If you have these white elephants that have been funded and are empty all over the country under this specific
PR,
project.
IARG programs and that.
Yeah. Those could easily be cultural spaces, not just youth spaces for youth spaces' sake.
But they're empty.
Of course,
They're absolutely
But
empty
that's-
with louvers missing.
that's where you have a lack of policy, both on both youth, culture, and some degree sport. So if it is that you have a proper youth policy and you have a proper cultural policy, you could have them intersect where you say every Friday we're going to fund poetry readings for young poets. So you have a young
Makes
James
sense.
Bond coming up.
Yeah.
Because you have a youth policy and you have a cultural policy to sort of dovetail, you can now link it to these municipal centers or the top level stuff like the
Could I get your views? My take on the entire administration in terms of young people is to make young people laborers and linemen. What, in your own estimation, is the fallout for the lack of a youth policy? Not only not speaking generally, but specifically to culture. For those young poets, those young artists, those young drama, those persons that love drama and acting.
Yeah.
What is the fallout? How are we wasting young people?
very simple.
How
Very
is-
simple. They got some a lot of 2 years ago, right? And this is how bad things are. Actresses and actors and playwrights under a digital funded, a private sector funded national drama festival almost protested in front of the Ministry of Culture because they weren't paid.
Wow.
Right? And this is a private sector thing, where you had a potentially viable public sector, private sector partnership on the development of drama, entirely funded by Digicel. The ministry simply had to manage the money. About 40 people, including Lisa Punch, wrote a letter. Yeah,
I saw my friend Mark Luke Edwards' name
Mark, look at
was
what-
listed there.
Yeah, a lot of people wrote a letter saying, Moses Telford, who is a Ghana Prize winner subsequently, right, wrote a letter saying that we have not been paid and we're tired of this. This is a perennial problem. Easily a dozen of those people now live in Trinidad. Right, so we have an actual loss of human capital because of the lack of culture policy on both sides, both culture
But it
and
sounds
youth.
more like incompetence and corruption on the part of the Ministry of Youth, Culture and Sport.
Yeah, well, they say there's incompetence, yes, but incompetence itself is direct corruption. Monies are being wasted. Monies are being funneled to people. Again, you have monies being spent, and you don't have the product, a tangible product. Like in the Caribbean press, that's why I've kept stressing on that. You have, I was asked in Parliament, how much money was spent, and so much money was spent on over 30,000 physical copies of books. You don't have 30,000 physical copies of books. You don't have 10,000 physical copies of books. So clearly, there's a gap between the money spent and what you actually have for that money. So there's the corruption. But incompetence itself is a form of corruption. In that if it is that you put somebody in place who is unable to function, and even if you're paying them taxpayer dollars to do nothing, and it happens at almost every aspect of culture. It happens at the museum, for example. You're paying them to do nothing, and it's a cost to the state, it's a cost to people. In that, if it is that you pay somebody to adequately ensure that systems are upkept, and those systems are not upkept, and so there's a fire, as happened in the museum, a painting gets burned, as has happened, there's a cost to restore that painting. Right? So, and that's where incompetence actually costs the state. And people, it's difficult to quantify how much incompetence has cost, but it's been a lot.
And I remember in one of the previous programs, I remember the Brigadier David Granger saying that part of his mission is to restore lean and clean government, and to reduce, if not alleviate, corruption entirely, because the monies that are being siphoned off through bad deals alone, if we're able to plug those holes, could really be a major investment in our country.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, go ahead, sir.
I think I see.
I want to know, what can we do at this stage to get our youths involved? Not only dealing with the youth policy, Because, all right, we're talking about all these youth policy, culture, we can deal with sports and stuff like that. I remember as a young girl going to the sports hall when they would normally have
This the
school
other day.
yeah,
That's the other day.
Last
school
year.
tournaments.
Last year.
School tournaments, and then I remember the era of Remington Ram, Lugard Mohan, and Lancelot Long playing basketball, and everybody wanted to go to the sports hall back then. Everybody wanted a piece of that action. The sports hall used to be full and running over, people standing, even in the pathway, just to, get a piece of the action. What happened? Where are all our youths going? Are we just going to sit down and be contented with them smoking or stealing or just liming on the roadside?
Again, you have all the policy in the set. There's absence of a youth policy, there's absence of sports policy. When you don't have policy in place to guide you, what you have is failing ad hoc mechanisms that they eventually disintegrate because there's no holistic concept of how they function together. And this is one of the things that I saw, for example, Granger speaking about, because he had a meeting with some young people. And I think this is a Blue Caps meeting. I think he said something to the effect that it makes no sense to have separate programs. You have to have is an integrated overall public service mechanism that you don't have somebody doing something here and it's unrelated to somebody else doing something here. I was, believe it or not, at one point a young national athlete at
Yes, we
President's
know that.
College.
We know that.
You know that, most people know that.
And at one time, one of our top scholars.
But I went to nationals on the 13, etc. And the nationals were a national event, even though it's kept in Linden. It was a national event. People would go, and young people in particular. And it was around this time they had people like these guys from, forget the names now. But you had young sports people who are virtual legends. Right, you don't have that now because you don't have a set policy to sustain that thing, to keep it in place. And eventually, these people go.
Yep.
They all leave. I see one of our star athletes. It's bad because her name is slipping me right now. She runs.
I like her.
No, yeah.
Your age is showing that.
My age. But she was complaining the other day that
Alian?
Alian was complaining online the other day. And she had a very, very heartfelt note, and I think a letter as well, that they were going to launch a synthetic track that people can't have to use up to now. There's some scandal with that. But they were bringing in somebody from, I think, Grenada, which has an actual policy, proper storage policy, and hence the person they were bringing, the sprinter, to launch a Guyanese. What you have is an investment and a set of white elephants, and again, that's where the money goes. The money goes into building structures, and you build a big school, a bigger thing, but usage, you don't invest in the people who are supposed to use them.
But the minister promised that by the end of 2014, certain parts of the same synthetic track would have been operationalized. The track itself, a few stands, other facilities, the training warm-up part. They've made a lot of promises.
The minister promised a functioning Caribbean Press Board since 2012, and before, actually, the fooled people said there's a Caribbean Press Board. The president in 2013 said in a few months there'll be a functioning Caribbean Press Board. In 2015, there's none. There was a promise of a youth policy that would have been in place probably 2011, or 2011. In a few months, there's
So
no
what
youth
we've
policy.
seen is empty promises. Empty promises. And James, and James, I wanted to pick your mind on something. I know both of you guys went to PC.
Both were national athletes. Both went for the enterprise. So
Yes.
Ruel is more
Has been
talented than
dominating.
I.
Or he knows somebody on the
He's a buddy of Frank Anthony's.
both of you guys went to the university, so you guys are big on education. Where are we on that, and where should we be going? I noticed that a promise, since we're talking about promises, was made to our last year top CSEC scholar,
It's Hamilton.
and that
Because of that.
and that promise is not going to be fulfilled, at least not in the near future? Where are we going, or where should we be going?
First of all, let me clarify. This is where James is taking advantage. I actually dropped out of UG, but because I wanted to do a program. I want to do creative writing session. There's no creative writing program, which is always an irony. Is that we have, until Bocas came about, and still we have the biggest nationally funded, state-funded prize in the Caribbean by any measure. But there's no creative writing program at the University of Ghana, which runs the prize. So
There's
that's-
English department.
yeah, but so you have so that sort of lack of synchronicity with
again, policy.
exactly. It's perennial. It exists in almost every sector. What we should be doing is, again, from a policy perspective, looking at and prioritizing what are our goals in terms of education. So you build a Marriott easily with taxpayer dollars, 56 million US, but you can't keep your promise to
A 17-year-old.
who top not the country alone,
The Caribbean.
the Caribbean.
And if I'm quoting the reports correctly, she said that promise was made, and she was acting on that promise because she knew she could not have afforded to go to Yale. And
Yeah.
so she started studying and preparing herself because she wanted the scholarship.
The specific promise, as
Yeah.
repeated by the Minister of Education and the President, was that if you top the country, not just the Caribbean alone, if you top the country, the top two students will have
Any university
of their choice. Now, the letter that they sent her were from three places: Cuba, China,
UG.
And Eugene.
and UG. So you see that you don't have a priority with regard. And again, I don't tend to repeat by rote political messages or propaganda, even though I might support this coalition. But this is where I think Granger has been strong, because he has concrete ideas for education and to prioritize education. It makes it said you can't even invest in a 5-star hotel, and the University of Ghana is crumbling. You don't have proper toilets at the one national university. I mean, it's indecent, and it shows where our priorities lie. You can subsidize what should be. Haiti is considered. Haiti usually saves Guyana from being the bottom of the list with a lot of indices, but they've had a history of even more divisive politics than we've had. They've had a history of famine. They've had a history of natural disaster, but they just opened a completely private sector-funded Marriott hotel. We, on the other hand, have a crumbling education system, and we're investing in a hotel, and not in the University of Ghana.
And then Mr. Braxton has the audacity to say it's not funded by taxpayers' dollars.
Well, then on the university, I think on the university, we stated clearly what our position is. In the coalition, we quadruple the investment in the university. Also, they will depoliticize the university.
Yes, this is
Which is very,
Very
very
important.
key. Persons, in the, young people should be heartened to hear that no longer will the political dinosaurs of the PPP be in control of their futures. You need people to put educators in education. You need to put educators in education. And I think you being a past president of the UGSS could attest to the struggles you have fought. It was publicized in the media. You have fought to have betterment in the university. Now, when students take to protest for their own education, I think Lincoln Henry told me this in President's College. He says, any person comes between you and your education, kill them. Lincoln Henry could quote him. He told me those words while I was studying at President's College, because he wanted to let me know that education was the only means by which I could uplift myself out of poverty, out of ignorance, you name it. Education was the only avenue, and is the only avenue for our young people.
And James, you raise an important point, because that is one of the reasons why I laugh and I smile now when I hear the government talking about the plans for UG, because I've been there and I'm still there and in the system, and I've seen since 2009, as early as that, there's been no qualitative change at the
None.
university.
I go there
No
often.
qualitative. So
None,
now when I
none.
hear, we have this plan and that plan and so on, I'm in awe. Right? That you had all this time to do this and all this time to do something and something meaningful without being pushed. And education is definitely not, at least not tertiary education at the top of this government's list.
The president, Don Ramatar, promised the University of Ghana students a first class research center. He promised them that. And nothing. They have not done, they've not even turned the sod.
The same way they promised Miss Hamilton. And I heard them in Commons Lodge just last night saying, one of the speakers from one of the rallies that they had, the rally that they had there, saying that I know you want roads and I want roads for you, but you have to come out and vote for us and put us back into government to give you roads. This is how long.
Come on.
Commons Lodge isn't half hour out of the city. And if you want us to put you back in office so we can get roads that you haven't, we haven't gotten what
Once
you
you
were
were
in
in
office.
office. So right now-
And I can talk about other things that concerns you. The first week I moved into Commons Lodge, somebody broke into my house.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah.
So we're talking about, and Commons Lodge seems to be the dumping ground for bodies now. It used to be the cemetery, but now there was a young woman found on Commons Lodge. There was the teacher from Saints who was found in Commons Lodge. A man was found recently in Commons. That seems to be the new. So we're talking about crime and securing our young people and securing our nation as well, and education.
Yeah, but I'll tell you how that actually bucks the trend that applies elsewhere. This is why I find a lot of absurdity in Ghana. Cummings Lodge is adjacent to the University of Ghana.
Yeah.
Right? Elsewhere, what you have is an integration of, what we call university towns. So towns are essentially built up. Municipal neighborhoods are essentially built up and integrated around universities. So if it is that there's a university in the center of a place, it actually attracts investment and it actually attracts enabling concessions and infrastructural investment from government. Because it makes sense. If it is that I put monies into this place, it makes education much easier for my people, and so that is education in the strict sense of receiving and going to things, but how they live. So there are apartment buildings, there are investments in food places, etc., and you build up the area, and that in itself adds and more people come, and it's a thing. As opposed to you drive into Cummings Lodge, the university is here, you drive in, and every single road there is narrow and pothole.
Even the main access road, Ruel, was
Uh-huh.
terrible.
Yeah,
There's big potholes in that road. That they would only fix it, patch it. But besides the government neglecting our young people in terms of culture and education, what is your take, for example, on the grassroots? Because what we're talking about is mostly looking at in the urban areas, the centers. But what hope is there for the rural and hinterland youth in terms of a policy or lack thereof
two
in
examples.
culture and in education?
Two examples. One, we have the highest suicide rate in the world. There's not
I thought we were happy here.
Yeah.
We were happy. We were happy.
the highest suicide rate in the world, and even that is from a skewed thing. We have the highest suicide rate in the world, not based on national incidence of suicide, but primarily rural incidence of suicide. People in Georgetown and other areas rarely kill themselves. It's young people, and it's overwhelmingly skewed to young people in rural communities. So that in itself is an indicator. Another tragic thing, and it deals with education and prioritization, etc. Last year, I think it was last year, year before the last, some digital representative went to hinterland area and found that the young children, primarily Armenian children, going to a school, and no doubt it would have been a school that a ton of money would have been invested in. The infrastructure, the physical infrastructure, our usual cost overruns, but the children didn't have shoes. So they donated 100 pairs of shoes to those children. People have made a lot of jokes about the Minister of Armenian Affairs and the whole Alien in the Mouth thing. But in a very serious thing, the Minister of Armenian Affairs, highly paid Minister of Armenian Affairs, who has direct responsibility for Armenian youth, spent $2.1 million taxpayers' money, not a loan or anything, not something that's insurance based, but $2.1 million of taxpayer money, while 100 Armenian students didn't have shoes. If it is that she spent that money on shoes, every single young Armenian child would have been wearing a pair of Air Jordans, high-end shoes.
Yeah. It's
Right?
2.71 million.
2.1 million?
2.1 million, yeah.
Yeah, it's
That's
so there's a lack. And it's done with impunity. There's a disconnect between government and people that it's only getting worse.
I think this government it's not the government of the day is not humane. It's all about themselves and who they could put in place to get probably a feedback, a drawback or something. They're not thinking about the Guyanese people. And I think at this point in our lives we need to take a stand and look and see what is going on and just don't go out there and vote. We need to vote change.
All right. Let's take a break here. We have to pay for this show. We come back and we talk some more to our very special guest, Will Johnson.
I am excited about the future for my country. I'm happy to see that we can set aside our differences, set aside the past, and work together for a better Guyana. Let's move forward together. I am excited about the future for my country.
Vote APNU AFC.
Put your hands in the air. Put your hands in the air now. Put your hands in the air.
People, me Alvin Pepperidge, who have suffered 23 years under this current government, and they're gonna ask me if I'm voting on May 11. Yes, and that's APNU AFC. Pepper them, Granger. It's time.
Tell them this is our time. Put your hands in the air. Put your hands in the air now. Put your hands in the air.
You're asking me if I voted this year. Me, Kwesi, yes. This is a stupid question. I stood in the game. May 11th, I voted change because it's time. Respect your vote.
Tell them this is our time. Tell them this is our time.
Them this is our time.
Welcome back to In Our Time. As promised, we got entertainer Marlon, who's going to give you some of the tracks that we're using on our Unity CD. We got Calvin Burnt, who's going to come through and sing some songs for you as well. So we're in for some fun right now. So over to Calvin Burnt. So over to entertainer Marlon as he spins the tracks. Let's go.
Hands up high. Everybody put your hands up high. Oh, put your...
This is our team song, by the way. In Our Time by Bungie Garland, if I'm not mistaken. Am I correct, Marlon?
Tell them this is our time.
Hands up high. Everybody put your hands up high. Oh, put your hands up high. Everybody put your hands up high.
This is bad.
Well, this is my time when everybody meets everybody. The time has come. The time when every queen and race will shine as one. Hey, well, everybody, let me see you put your hands in the air. Hey, put your hands in the air. 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 Put your hands up. Because this is done.
Party downstairs.
Every day we hear, I don't like it. What does he do? Never do it. I don't like it. Just so you don't like somebody with a bad mind. I don't like she. What does she do? Never do it. So why you don't like she? Just so you don't like somebody with a bad mind. Every time I think about this situation, while I sing it for just for the bad people. How can you want someone for the first time? Hey, he cut me down. He cut me down. Like that. Every day is sweat, I come out to sweat, I'm better sweating more than you. It's sweat, I come out to sweat, I went to sweating more than you. I come to wine and jam and I show to catch it more than you. Cause when I'm flexing off course, I just do it like a boss. I'm flexing morning and evening. We jumping up, this is my home and I'm leaving. I can't get over this feeling, this feeling. I just want to pay myself. People let me 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 pay myself.
What would you do?
That was
back,
good. That was good.
back in regular programming.
Yeah, back to regular program. As you can see, Ruel can't dance to save his life.
This way, right.
Marlon, that was great, man. That was great, man. As the people know that I'm gonna be a DJ soon too.
Yes.
DJ Bond.
Something for the side.
I am excited about the future for my country. I'm happy to see that we can set aside our differences, set aside the past, and work together for a better Guyana. Let's move forward together. I am excited about the future for my country.
Vote APNU AFC.
Put your hands in the air. Put your hands in the air now. Put your hands in the air. Put your hands in the air.
I'm Nia Gonzalez, and on May 11th, I'm voting for APNU AFC. It is time.
Tell them this is our time. Tell them this is our time. Tell them this is our time. Put your hands in the air. Put your hands in the air now. Put your hands in the air.
You see, on May the 11th, me, Calvin Burnett, I'm making sure I going out there early because it's time for change. Hear what? Respect your vote.
Tell them this is our time. Tell them this is our time. Tell them this is our time.
Guyana, welcome back. As you know, this is a special feature of In Our Time. A lot of excitement. We have here Calvin Burnett. Most of you know him from the jingle, the GT&T jingle a few
Man
years
with the
ago.
golden voice.
He got a good voice. I mean, he could rival. I tell them,
The best.
he's better than
Yeah.
Christopher Martin
Yeah.
and all these guys
Yeah.
they're hyping up. He's better than all of them. So Calvin is gonna do something special for us. But before, we want to give you a bit of our team song, the APNU AFC team song, which was written and produced and sung by none other than Kwesi Ace, who was last year Soko Monarch, but he got second this year, and Calvin sang on that track as well. So we're gonna play a bit from that for you. So listen, Guyana, In Our Time. So we're gonna give you a bit.
It's time. We vote to change. I say it's time. We vote to change. This year we vote to change and we also voting for unity. One people, one nation, one destiny is the place to be. Put your eggs inside the box next to the palm and key. Everybody in your country shout out APNU and AFC. It's David Danger, Moses Nagamoto. On election day, we electing you. Put your eggs in the box next to the palm and key. We voting change in your country. Our plan is one nation. Youth invention creation. Security your foundation. Children getting free education. All we need is a nomination to stop this damn assassination. If we do the evaluation, we can find a real good solution. Check. Some people just telling lies. White collar crime is made disguise. We don't want to be patronized. All we want is relation rise. If we only cooperate, we never even just stop this. Everybody must concentrate. We might even care the crime rate. It's you. It's you. N-I-T-Y. Said it's you. N-I-T-Y. It's you. N-I-T-Y. I want to see you.
So there you have it, our team song. It is time. Vote May 11th, the coalition APNU AFC. Now, Calvin, welcome to the show, man. Welcome
being
to the
here, good
show.
being
Welcome
here,
to the
good
show.
being here.
Now, tell us something. Why is it that you chose to endorse the APNU AFC coalition?
No, as the team song said, it's time. And definitely in our land, we need change. We need more jobs. Kids are coming out of school with a whole lot of subjects, nobody's working. So, we need to enhance certain things. So change is definitely needed.
So you really believe this coalition could work? I mean, you really believe that APNU AFC could pull this off?
Yeah, definitely so. Definitely so.
All right. I know Kwesi endorsed as well, you know.
Yes.
And we know you guys got tremendous talent. I mean, would you like to see a government do more for talented people like yourself?
Definitely so. Guyana is vastly talented. And, to see the amount of talent we have and, we're not getting there, it's tough. So with this new government, we hope that, we can get out there, do more, showcase what Guyana has to offer.
Now, one thing I could assure you about copyright legislation, I could assure you that we will focus on copyright legislation to ensure that we protect your music. So your music could pay for you and take care of you. I advised Calvin, he calls me Godfather. I said, Calvin, let me tell you something. Music will not take care of you in Guyana. And we want to ensure that when we take government on May 11, we look out for our artists. We can't have artists begging and going hand to mouth.
Exactly.
Yep.
But your talent must provide for you. So we will ensure we protect our artists, protect their music, so that when a registration plays your music, you get paid for it. So Calvin, give us something, man. Give us some songs here, man. Sing something for us.
I was born by the river in a little tent. Oh, and just like the river, I've been running ever since. It's been a long time coming, but I know change gon' come. Oh, yes, it will. It's been too hard living, but I'm afraid to die, 'cause I don't know what's up there beyond the sky. It's been a long time coming, but I know change gonna come.
Wow.
Awesome talent. Awesome talent. James, let me say this.
Yeah, sure.
That we should not lose this young man to North America. He should not feel that he has to go there to make it big. that once he's committed to stay in his country, that he should be compensated for this kind of talent. As long as he keeps producing the material, he shouldn't have to leave our country.
The thing is, Calvin's not the only one, as Calvin said before. He's not the only one. I had the privilege of seeing Bunji Garlin live. Living in Trinidad, the man from Arimo. I was there when the Spaniard now started bursting onto the scene. And Kwesi reminds me so much of Bunji. He's a lyrical genius.
Yeah, definitely true.
And Kwesi is, as you know, music does not pay Kwesi in Guyana. And Kwesi's come on board to support the coalition. I know a lot of people have left. Eddie Neblet, talented.
Yep.
Bevon Semple,
Yep.
extremely talented, we want Guyana to keep our musicians. I see Mystic is doing something, and I want to support Alabama, who's my brother. It's extremely talented, but music cannot support these guys. Natural Black, he had to jump to Jamaica, and that's what we're doing. We're just exporting our talent, and we want to ensure that you guys right here could develop, become successful, and see you guys in the Billboard.
Definitely.
See you guys in the Billboard sooner or later. So we're gonna go back to Entertainer Marlon. But before, we need some closing words from Ruel. Ruel is here with us, and Ruel can't dance.
Essie had a question.
I think Essie has a question for Ruel. Then we're gonna hear from Ruel.
Ruel all afternoon.
I don't mind.
Go ahead, Essie.
He's a dominant force.
Right there.
Ruel, before you leave us, I would like you to leave some positive words for our youth, encouraging them to come out on May 11th and vote change.
First of all, Calvin, this is extremely beautiful singing.
Thank you.
And I think much of my work I do with cultural policy advocacy, etc., was precisely there to retain talent such as yours. I don't think we need to move. So hopefully, I'm glad you've endorsed. For not just young musicians and young writers as well, and my primary skill, my primary art is writing.
And he's closest with a pen in his hand. You can tell.
When I engage in the political process, hold whichever political entity empowering it account is empowering the account, but recognize that frankly, it boils down to who's doing stuff for you and who isn't. Who has your interests at heart when they have all the tools, whether they have the tools or not, and who doesn't. And I think we need tangible change that will not come from continuing policies that we have, because artists keep leaving. There's a suppression of calypsonians, of writers, etc. My advice, and I tend to not do stuff like this because I'm also self-conscious, but engage in the process, hold people accountable, and if it is that there's no change when you put some change, vote them out too. It's simple, but give people a chance. People in Ghana don't know what real political change is. We spent 23 years, which is mostly lives, or the entire lives of most young people in this space. Give yourself a chance to change.
Endorse.
Thank you, Roel. So we're gonna wrap up and give entertainer Marlon a chance to play some more music as we end it with a bang. So enjoy the Easter, fly the kites safely. Do not fly the kites close to the light poles. Go in the open place spaces. And remember, the reason we celebrate is because Christ is risen. Have a good Easter holidays.
And do not drink and drive.
Oh yes, don't drink and drive. Let's go, entertainer Marlon. Let's take it up. You were in the street. You know you gotta keep him in. You gotta keep him in. He's the okay, all right. No problem. No, it's not yet. I can't show everything, man. I can't show everything. I gotta save something with the house. Black and white. Yeah, it's a big tune. Big one. This David Gray, this song. This one here. David. You ever see it?
Now there's so much war and crime and destruction over to this land. But all the youth them come to turn and turn around. Don't understand. Everybody's happy for Sunday by day. And it's a time for you like day. All my brethren and sisters. Holy power we share it where we say love and unity, peace and harmony. Love and unity, hey, 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 hey. Love and unity, peace and harmony.
Tell them this is our time.